Wisteria House loomed on the precipice of the Arabian Sea's embrace, a skeletal monument to forgotten grandeur and whispered tragedies. The villagers of the nearby coastal hamlet, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the tides and ancient superstitions, spoke of it in hushed tones, their words laced with a fear that had been passed down through generations. They claimed the very stones of the house sighed with unseen burdens, that the gnarled wisteria vines, like sentient serpents, tightened their grip on the decaying facade under the cloak of night, and that within its shadowed chambers the boundary between the living and the spectral was as fragile as a moth's wing. For Zara, Liam, Maya, Rohan, and Chloe, these tales were mere fodder for their shared obsession, urban exploration. They were a collective of thrill-seekers, their veins coursing with an insatiable hunger for the forgotten corners of the world, the places where history had curdled into eerie silence. Zara, the de facto leader and the face of their burgeoning online channel, lived for the perfect shot, the captivating narrative that would send shivers down spines. Liam, the group's tech wizard, was a walking arsenal of cameras, audio recorders, environmental sensors, and a fleet of agile drones, all poised to capture the unseen. Maya, the historian, possessed an almost romantic fascination with ruins, seeing in their decay not just neglect but the lingering echoes of lives lived and lost. Rohan, ever the pragmatist, served as their anchor to reality, his skepticism a constant counterpoint to the mounting strangeness they often encountered. And then there was Chloe, the quiet artist, her sketchbook a silent witness, her charcoal strokes capturing the subtle nuances of atmosphere and the unsettling details that often escape the other's notice. The day they chose to explore Wisteria House was steeped in a melancholic drizzle, the sky a bruised canvas of gray and purple. The iron gates, their once ornate designs now rusted and twisted, groaned in protest as Zara heaved them open, the sound echoing across the desolate grounds like a mournful sigh. The house stood before them, a gaunt silhouette against the turbulent sea, its darkened windows like vacant eyes staring out at a world it no longer belonged to. The wisteria, a riot of faded purple blossoms clinging to the weathered stone, seemed less like decoration and more like grasping tendrils, their dried petals resembling drops of old, coagulated blood. Absolutely breathtaking, Zara breathed, her phone already held aloft, capturing the scene. Imagine the raw, unfiltered energy here. This is going to be epic, Rohan grunted, pulling his collar higher against the damp chill. Epically damp and probably riddled with asbestos. Let's just document and get out before the tide comes in, or the whole thing collapses on us. Maya, however, was already drawn to the massive oak front door, her fingers tracing the weathered carvings that adorned its surface. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. Look at this craftsmanship. There's a story etched into every grain, every mark of time. Liam, his backpack a symphony of clicking and whirring devices, consulted the notes on his tablet. Alistair Blackwood, a shipping magnate, built this place in the late 1880s. Lavish parties, a prominent family, and then silence. The local lore is patchy, whispers of a sudden tragedy, a child who vanished without a trace, and the family abandoning the house soon after. Chloe, her gaze fixed on an upper window where a tattered lace curtain billowed gently, despite the complete stillness of the air inside, was already sketching in her pad, her charcoal moving with a swift, intuitive grace. She didn't speak, but her intense focus conveyed a sense of something unseen, something that had caught her artist's eye. With a collective push, they forced the heavy front door inward, stepping into a cavern of shadows, and the suffocating aroma of decay mingled with a cloying sweetness, like overripe fruit left to rot, a scent that hinted at something unnatural beneath the surface of neglect. The grand hall was a skeletal echo of its former glory. A once magnificent crystal chandelier lay shattered on the decaying parquet floor, its fragmented prisms reflecting the weak light in 1,000 distorted glimmers. Cobwebs, thick and sticky, hung like macabre tapestries, draping the antique furniture in ghostly shrouds. Yet amidst the desolation, the ghosts of opulence lingered. The faded floral patterns of the peeling wallpaper, the faint rectangular outlines on the walls where grand paintings once hung, the curve of a banister worn smooth by countless hands. As they ventured deeper into the house's decaying embrace, each room seemed to possess its own distinct atmosphere of sorrow and silence. The library, lined with shelves of crumbling leather-bound books, felt heavy with unspoken words, the accumulated knowledge and stories now turning to dust. The formal dining room, where dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing through grimy windows, seemed to resonate with phantom clinking of silverware and the hushed murmur of long-dead conversations. It was in the master bedroom, a chamber draped in an almost palpable sense of loss, that the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A massive four-poster bed stood like a forgotten monument, its once luxurious velvet drapes now tattered and festooned with cobwebs. A broken cheval mirror on the dressing table reflected their distorted figures, each shard a fractured glimpse into their growing unease. An inexplicable chill permeated the air, a cold that seeped into their bones and had nothing to do with the dampness outside. "Did anyone else just feel that?" Zara whispered, her usual bravado momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of genuine apprehension. Liam, his brow furrowed, consulted his handheld thermal camera. "Temperature just dropped about 5 degrees in here. And there's no discernible draft. The windows are sealed," Rohan scoffed, but even his voice lacked its usual confident edge. "Old houses do that. The stone retains the cold." Maya, her gloved hand resting on a small, intricately carved wooden box on the bedside table, frowned. "This feels significant. The craftsmanship is exquisite." Suddenly, a faint whisper brushed against their ears, so soft and fleeting that they almost dismissed it as the rustling of unseen dust motes. But there was no breeze, no movement in the stagnant air. They exchanged uneasy glances, a shared prickle of unease crawling up their spines. Liam's array of sensors began to flicker erratically, their digital displays flashing cryptic readings. "My EMF reader is going haywire," he muttered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "There's a strong electromagnetic field in this room, and it's fluctuating wildly." Over the next hour, the whispers became more frequent, more insistent. Sometimes they resembled a sigh, heavy with sorrow. Other times a faint murmur, like a name being softly called on the edge of hearing. Chloe's sketchbook pages filled with increasingly dark and unsettling imagery, swirling vortexes of shadow, indistinct figures lurking in the periphery, their forms barely discernible yet undeniably present. They discovered a child's room, its walls adorned with faded drawings of fantastical creatures rendered in crayon, their vibrant colors now muted by time. A wooden rocking horse lay on its side, its painted eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, as if it had been abruptly abandoned mid-rock. On the dusty floor beside it lay a small, tarnished silver locket, its surface etched with delicate floral patterns. Maya carefully picked it up, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. As she gently pried it open, a clear, unmistakable childlike voice echoed in the small room. "Mama." The sound was undeniable, piercing through the oppressive silence and chilling them to their very core. Even Rohan, the staunch skeptic, visibly paled, his usual sardonic expression replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Zara's phone, still recording, shook in her trembling hand. Did you all just hear that?" Liam's equipment erupted in a cacophony of static and frantic beeps, the digital readouts flashing a chaotic jumble of numbers and symbols. They stumbled back from the child's room, their initial thrill of exploration replaced by a gnawing, visceral dread. They retreated to the relative openness of the grand hall, the vast emptiness somehow feeling less claustrophobic than the individual rooms that seemed to breathe with unseen presences. "Okay," Zara said, her voice a strained attempt at composure. "There has to be a rational explanation for all of this." Rational explanation. Liam's voice was tight with a fear he couldn't quite mask. "My equipment is picking up things that defy rational explanation. Anomalous energy surges, disembodied sounds. This isn't just an old house creaking." Maya clutched the silver locket tightly in her hand. "The Blackwood family. The stories mentioned a young daughter who simply vanished. Lily, I think her name was." Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the silence of the upper floor, a sound so raw and filled with pure terror and agonizing despair that it made their blood run cold. They froze, their hearts hammering against their ribs, the air in the grand hall suddenly thick and suffocating. "Chloe!" Zara yelled, a sudden sickening realization dawning on her that they hadn't seen the quiet artist for several minutes. They surged towards the creaking staircase, their fear lending them a desperate, adrenaline-fueled speed. The upper floor was shrouded in an even deeper gloom, the air heavy with an almost tangible sense of dread. The scream had emanated from a room at the far end of the long, shadowy hallway. They found the door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning them into the unknown. Pushing it open, they recoiled in a collective gasp of horror. Chloe stood in the center of the room, her back to them, her small frame unnaturally rigid. Her sketchbook lay open on the dusty floor, the charcoal drawing depicting a grotesque figure of nightmare, elongated, skeletal fingers reaching out from a swirling vortex of darkness. and etched onto the wall behind her, in what looked sickeningly like fresh blood, were 3 intricate symbols they had never seen before, their forms radiating an unsettling power. As they watched, paralyzed by a terror that seemed to root them to the spot, Chloe slowly turned. Her eyes were wide and vacant, devoid of any recognition, her face contorted in a silent, horrifying scream. And then a voice, ancient and malevolent, a voice that was not hers, rasped from her throat, each syllable laced with a chillingly alien cadence. "You have awakened what sleeps here, and now it hungers." Liam fumbled frantically for the taser in his backpack, his hand shaking so violently he could barely grip it. But before he could even raise the weapon, the gnarled wisteria vines outside the window began to thrash violently against the glass, their movements unnatural and purposeful, as if imbued with a malevolent life force. The room plunged into an oppressive, unnatural darkness. The only sounds, the frantic rustling of the possessed vines and the chilling, unearthly laughter that now poured forth from Chloe's lips. Panic seized them, a primal urge to flee overwhelming their senses. Rohan lunged forward, trying to pull Chloe back, but her strength was unnatural, her grip like iron, her eyes burning with an eerie inner light. Maya screamed, a high-pitched sound swallowed by the growing chaos. Zara's phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor, its lens capturing the nightmarish scene in a distorted, flickering frame. They stumbled backward, desperate to escape the suffocating terror that had enveloped the room. As they reached the doorway, the floor beneath their feet groaned ominously, the sound like the death rattle of the house itself. "It's collapsing," Liam yelled, his voice hoarse with fear. They scrambled back, their movements clumsy and desperate, just as a large section of the floor gave way with a deafening crack, plunging them into the inky blackness below. They landed hard on what felt like a damp, cold earthen floor, a shower of dust and debris raining down upon them. Gasping for breath, their bodies aching from the fall, they picked themselves up. The air down here was thick with the smell of damp earth and a metallic tang that hinted at something ancient and perhaps sinister. Above them, they could still hear Chloe's chilling, unearthly laughter echoing through the gaping hole in the floor. "We need to get out of here," Rohan gasped, his face pale and streaked with dust in the faint light filtering through the cracks in the collapsed floorboards. Liam fumbled for his flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky swath through the oppressive darkness. They appeared to be in a small, cramped earthen cellar, the stone walls damp and moss-covered, the air heavy and still. In one corner, a dark, narrow opening beckoned, a rough-hewn tunnel leading further into the unseen depths of the earth. "Where does that lead?" Zara whispered, her voice trembling despite her attempts at composure. "No idea," Liam replied, his voice grim. "But it's got to be better than staying here with that." He gestured vaguely upwards towards the source of the terrifying laughter. They cautiously made their way towards the tunnel entrance. As they reached the opening, a low, guttural dragging sound echoed from the shadows within. Something was moving in the darkness, something heavy and unseen. Liam raised his flashlight, his hand shaking so violently that the beam danced erratically across the rough-hewn walls. The light momentarily illuminated a pair of glowing red eyes, staring back at them from the depths of the tunnel. A low, menacing growl rumbled through the confined space, a sound that spoke of ancient hunger and malevolent intent. Fear, cold and primal, gripped them with icy tendrils. They were trapped, caught between a friend possessed by an unknown entity and whatever lurked in the suffocating darkness below. Their adventure into the forgotten had taken a terrifying turn, plunging them into a nightmare far beyond their wildest imaginings. The guttural snarl that ripped through the darkness of the tunnel sent a shockwave of pure, unadulterated terror through Zara, Liam, Maya, and Rohan. The beam of Liam's flashlight, gripped in a trembling hand, danced erratically across the rough-hewn walls, catching fleeting glimpses of those malevolent red eyes before they retreated deeper into the oppressive blackness. The monstrous shape remained largely obscured, a hulking presence just beyond the reach of their desperate illumination. "What in God's name was that?" Maya choked out, her voice barely a ragged whisper, her eyes wide with a primal fear she had never before experienced. Rohan, his face ashen in the dim light filtering from the collapsed floor above, swallowed hard. His usual veneer of skepticism had shattered completely. I don't know. Some kind of creature? But it looked wrong. Unnatural. The tremor in his voice betrayed the profound unease that had settled deep within him. No earthly animal possessed eyes that burned with such an intelligent, malevolent fire. Zara, ever the pragmatist even when confronted with the seemingly impossible, grabbed Liam's arm, her grip surprisingly firm despite her own palpable fear. "We can't just stand here. Chloe. Whatever unholy thing has taken hold of Chloe, it's still up there." The chilling laughter echoing from above served as a horrifying reminder of the immediate threat. Liam, his face a mask of pale dread, nodded slowly. "The tunnel. It's the only other way. We can't go back up there right now." The thought of facing the possessed Chloe in that collapsing room was enough to solidify his decision. They hesitated for a heart-stopping moment, the terrifying laughter from above battling with the unknown horrors that lurked in the darkness below. The primal instinct for self-preservation ultimately won. Cautiously, Liam led the way into the narrow tunnel, his flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the suffocating gloom. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with the cloying sweetness they had noticed in the main house, now intensified and laced with a musky, almost reptilian odor. The tunnel walls were rough and damp, slick with an unknown moisture, and the ground underfoot was uneven, a treacherous landscape of loose stones and unseen dips. As they moved deeper into the earth's embrace, the dragging sound returned, closer this time, accompanied by a low, guttural growling that seemed to vibrate through the very rock beneath their feet. They could hear the distinct scraping of sharp claws against the earthen floor, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "It's following us," Rohan whispered, his head swiveling nervously, his eyes darting into the oppressive darkness behind them, half expecting the glowing red eyes to materialize at any moment. Suddenly, a section of the tunnel wall to their right crumbled away, revealing a small, dusty alcove. Inside, nestled amongst the fallen debris, lay a child's doll. It was old and worn, its porcelain face cracked in several places, one of its painted blue eyes missing, leaving a dark, unsettling void. Maya gasped, a wave of recognition washing over her as she recalled the style of the drawings in the upstairs nursery. As she instinctively reached for the forgotten toy, a wave of icy cold washed over them, a sudden and profound drop in temperature that made their breath catch in their throats. Simultaneously, the faint whisper they had heard throughout the house returned, clearer and more plaintive this time, seemingly emanating from the doll itself. "Don't leave me." They froze, their hearts pounding in unison against their ribs, the silence amplifying the unsettling whisper. Liam's EMF reader, still clutched in his hand, spiked violently, the needle vibrating so intensely it seemed on the verge of breaking. "The energy readings, they're completely erratic down here. Something is definitely not right." Zara, her voice tight with a fear that threatened to overwhelm her, urged them onward. "We can't dwell on this. We need to keep moving, find a way out." The image of Chloe's vacant eyes and the chilling voice that had emanated from her spurred them forward. They pressed deeper into the earth, the growling growing steadily louder, the scraping closer and more insistent. The tunnel began to slope downwards at a steeper angle, the darkness becoming absolute, swallowing the weak beam of Liam's flashlight as if it were a mere candle flame in a vast abyss. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe, and the cloying sweetness intensified, now tinged with a metallic, almost coppery scent. Then, cutting through the oppressive silence and the menacing growls, they heard it, a soft, heart-wrenching, whimpering sound, like a child crying in the dark. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it grew steadily louder as they continued their descent. "Did you hear that?" Maya asked, her voice filled with a strange mixture of fear and a profound sense of pity. The sound resonated with the tragedy they had sensed within the house. The whimpering led them to a larger cavern, a vast underground space that opened up unexpectedly before them. The air here was strangely still, the oppressive atmosphere of the narrow tunnel replaced by a palpable sense of sorrow, a heavy blanket of unspoken grief. In the center of the cavern, huddled on the damp earth floor, was a small, spectral figure. It looked like a child, no older than 7 or 8, translucent and shimmering in the faint, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from within her. Tears that appeared to be made of pure, shimmering light streamed down her ethereal cheeks, leaving trails of luminescence on her translucent skin. The spectral child looked up at them, her large, sorrowful eyes filled with an ancient sadness that belied her youthful appearance. Who are you?" Zara stammered, her fear momentarily overshadowed by a profound sense of empathy for the spectral figure before them. The spectral child spoke, her voice a soft, heartbreaking sob that echoed through the cavern. "I am Lily, Alistair Blackwood's daughter. I got lost. A long, long time ago. And the shadows, they won't let me go." Her voice held the weight of decades of sorrow and confinement. As Lily spoke, a guttural growl echoed from the far end of the cavern, cutting through the stillness like a jagged shard of ice. From the deepest shadows, the creature emerged. It was even more grotesque and terrifying than they had glimpsed in the tunnel, hunched and malformed, its limbs elongated and twisted into unnatural angles, its glowing red eyes burning with a malevolent intelligence that sent a fresh wave of terror through them. Sharp, obsidian claws dripped with a viscous black substance that seemed to absorb the light. It was the physical embodiment of nightmare, a creature born from the house's dark history and sustained by its sorrow. That's what took her?" Rohan whispered, his face a mask of horrified realization, his last vestiges of skepticism finally and irrevocably shattered. Lily recoiled in terror as the creature approached, its guttural growls escalating into a low, menacing snarl that echoed through the cavern, the sound promising unimaginable pain. "It feeds on sorrow, on fear," she whimpered, her spectral form flickering as the creature drew closer. "It keeps me here, trapped." Suddenly, Maya, still clutching the tarnished silver locket she had found in the child's room upstairs, stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the spectral child. "Lily," she said softly, her voice filled with a profound compassion that seemed to cut through the oppressive atmosphere. "This was yours, wasn't it?" She gently opened the locket. Inside, nestled against faded purple velvet, lay a tiny, perfectly preserved dried forget-me-not. As Maya held it out towards Lily, a faint, warm, golden light emanated from the locket, bathing Maya's hand in a gentle glow. The spectral child's eyes widened, her sorrowful gaze fixed on the locket. A look of intense longing and a flicker of recognition washed over her translucent face. She reached out a shimmering, ethereal hand towards the small silver object, her movements hesitant yet filled with an undeniable yearning. As her spectral fingers brushed against the cool metal of the locket, a wave of pure, brilliant white light erupted from within, flooding the cavern with an intense, almost blinding radiance. The monstrous creature recoiled as if struck by a physical force, hissing and screeching in a high-pitched, agonizing sound as if burned by the holy light. The oppressive shadows that clung to Lily's form began to dissipate, and her spectral figure became brighter, more solid, losing some of its translucent quality. The air in the cavern filled with an overwhelming sense of peace, a stark and miraculous contrast to the suffocating dread they had felt just moments before. The faint whispers they had heard throughout the house intensified, but now they sounded different, softer, gentler, like a collective sigh of relief carried on an unseen breeze. Upstairs, in the decaying bedroom, Chloe suddenly gasped, her vacant eyes snapping back into focus. She blinked, her gaze darting around the room with confusion and lingering fear etched on her face. The strange, blood-like symbols on the wall began to fade, the crimson substance dissolving into nothingness as if it had never been there. The violent thrashing of the wisteria vines outside the window stilled, their movements ceasing as abruptly as they had begun. Down in the cavern, as the brilliant white light gradually subsided, Lily stood before them, no longer a shimmering specter but a real, tangible child, though still bearing the marks of her long and unnatural confinement. Pale, almost translucent skin, a fragile frame, and eyes that held a deep, ancient sadness that spoke of decades lost. The monstrous creature had vanished completely, leaving behind only a lingering stench of decay and a faint echo of its terrifying snarl. You set me free," Lily whispered, her voice now clear and surprisingly strong, no longer the ethereal sob they had heard moments before. Maya knelt beside her, tears of relief and wonder streaming down her face. "What happened to you, Lily? How did you get trapped here for so long?" Lily recounted a tragic tale, her voice soft but steady. She had been playing in the gardens of Wisteria House many decades ago, when she stumbled upon a hidden, overgrown passage leading down into the cellar. Her childish curiosity had led her into the darkness, and she had quickly become lost in the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the house. The creature, drawn to her fear and despair, had found her in the cavern and trapped her there, feeding on her sorrow and her fading hope, keeping her tethered to the house as a source of its dark sustenance. The silver locket, a cherished gift from her mother, had been her only solace, the last tangible link to the love and light of her past, a pure vessel of emotion that the creature could not fully corrupt or touch. Maya opening it, the act of selfless compassion, had somehow broken the creature's hold, releasing Lily from her spectral prison. Just then they heard a faint but distinct sound from above, Chloe calling their names, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and bewildered confusion. Liam, his face a mixture of awe and profound disbelief, gently helped Lily to her feet. "We need to get you out of here, Lily. Back into the light." As they made their way back through the narrow tunnel, the oppressive atmosphere had completely lifted. The air felt clean and fresh, the darkness no longer menacing. The scraping sounds were gone, replaced by a profound silence. They emerged from the collapsed floor of the upstairs room to find Chloe pale but physically unharmed, her eyes wide with confusion. She had no memory of what had transpired after she turned to face them, only a terrifying blankness where the malevolent entity had resided. The reunion was deeply emotional, a mixture of tearful relief and stunned disbelief. They tried to explain the incredible events that had unfolded in the cellar, the spectral child, the monstrous creature, the miraculous release. But the words felt inadequate to convey the otherworldly horror and the subsequent wonder they had experienced. Lily, though physically frail, seemed to draw strength from their presence and the return to the world above. The rain had finally ceased, and a weak afternoon sun peeked through the dissipating clouds, casting a golden, almost benevolent glow on the decaying facade of Wisteria House. As they gently led Lily away from the house, the gnarled wisteria vines seemed to subtly retract their grip on the crumbling stone, their once menacing presence now strangely passive. The house stood silent behind them, its malevolent energy seemingly subdued, its dark secrets partially unveiled. They took Lily to the local village, where the elders, their memories stretching back through generations of whispered tales, were stunned into awed silence by her appearance. They had always believed young Lily Blackwood had simply vanished, another tragic victim claimed by the house's dark and enduring curse. News of Lily's miraculous reappearance spread through the small community like wildfire, soon reaching the wider world. The urban explorer's raw and terrifying footage, especially the chilling final moments of Part 1, went viral, captivating a global audience hungry for the strange and unexplained. Skeptics and believers alike were drawn into the extraordinary mystery of Wisteria House. Zara, Liam, Maya, and Rohan found themselves at the center of an intense media storm, their lives irrevocably changed by what they had witnessed. But their primary focus remained on Lily, ensuring she received the medical care, emotional support, and gentle guidance she needed to reintegrate into a world she had left behind decades ago, a world that had moved on without her. The ending of their terrifying adventure was not the gory spectacle they might have inadvertently sought when they first crossed the threshold of Wisteria House, but something far more profound, a miracle born from compassion, a forgotten piece of the past resurrected by an act of kindness. Wisteria House remained on the bluff, a silent sentinel overlooking the sea, but the whispers within its walls had changed, their mournful tones replaced by a quiet sense of peace, a testament to a child returned, and a darkness, for now, vanquished by the enduring power of light and love.